at the beginning and all the rest of it, and no one joins for this part, like I said. Yeah, just a quick hello and welcome. Thank you to everybody who joined. The intention was to do this meetup in person, but due to kind of logistics and train strikes and everything else, we decided to do it online. That being said, we're hoping to try and get something in person by the end of the year, because we know that there is still an appetite for that, but with the disparate working still, it does tend to be challenging, and we do need to know that we're gonna get a good turnout. So yeah, provided there is still an appetite for that, we'll try and get some more in person, especially going into next year. So just a very quick one. The group, why it was started, this is an independent MuleSoft meetup group, so we don't receive any funding from MuleSoft or any swag or marketing or anything like that. It's independently run by us, for us. So again, welcome everybody's suggestions, ideas, inputs, views, and volunteers to produce content. So obviously I'll thank the panel and Justin in a minute before we get started. But again, we can't have these events happen without people stepping forward and producing content and sharing interesting topics and learns and things from this particular world. My name's Chris Mack. I'm one of the directors at QuadCore. I previously ran MuleSoft and Salesforce practice for Third Republic, and I've been in the MuleSoft space for about 5, 6, 7 years, maybe, affectionately previously known as MuleSoft Mac, but we cover all sorts of things wider than just MuleSoft in QuadCore around APIs, integration and microservices and cloud-native technologies. I will share a link this is my only request, I will share a link in the chat after my little blurb to follow our LinkedIn page. I'm on a bit of a mission to get us to 1,000 followers on LinkedIn by the end of the year. So I think we're on 985. So that is my only request, my only ask of the community, just to follow our LinkedIn page. We share all sorts of blogs and posts and insights and thought leaderships about APIs and integration and stuff. And obviously you can see what we're up to and how we're growing as well. Over to John.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, very, very quickly from me. Yeah, Jonathan Banks. I now lead the MuleSoft practice at Third Republic, the recruitment practice supporting MuleSoft partners and end customers across the UK and Europe at the moment with permanent and freelance hiring. I am now off the back of Dreamforce, also a MuleSoft mentor, obviously aimed at building the community, the ecosystem. Again, a massive part of this is getting you guys involved, as Chris said, to participate and join us in this group, and hopefully continue to deliver some useful content across the ecosystem. Again, we've got tonight, we are going to record it, so hopefully afterwards, if there are things you want to revisit, we'll put stuff out, and yeah, you can let us know.
Stuff. Cheers, John. Finally, last quick piece. This is the 15th MuleSoft meetup from this particular community. We now have 864 members within the community. So yeah, the meetup's been going again about 5 years or so now. And like I said, it's been completely organically grown. It's for us, by us. And again, I can't thank enough the people within the community who attend these events and produce content and input and views and all those sorts of things that help make it happen. So thank you to everyone, and provided there's still an appetite for it, we'll keep doing them. And finally, we still believe it's the largest MuleSoft meetup group in Europe. No one's told me differently, and so I'm going to continue with this with this view until someone tells me differently. But yeah, I'm going to hand over to Justin now. Justin is Justin Burt's head of architecture, and I'm sure he can do a better job than me of introducing himself at the University Arts London. And he's going to share his customer journey with MuleSoft. We're also going to be joined by Stefan Pajon, who is, I believe, a senior solutions consultant at MuleSoft. Correct me, Stefan?
That's close enough. That's close enough, Chris. Thank you.
At MuleSoft, so again, he might be able to answer more kind of MuleSoft focused or product focused questions. And Vaughan Haybitter, who is the director at QuadCore as well, enterprise integrated architect, and I think has probably been with MuleSoft since day one. If anyone remembers, Mule 2.0 form was there. Yeah, there's very little he doesn't know about MuleSoft or wider integration. So without further ado, over to the real reason we are here, and I'll stop sharing. Justin.
Oh. Okay, can everyone see that?
You can.
Yes.
Excellent.
All good.
In which case we better put it into has that gone full screen for everyone?
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay. Hi. Yeah, I'm Justin Burt. I'll say a bit more about me in a minute, but I'm going to give you a little talk through about UAL's history with MuleSoft and how that all started and our journey with them thus far. So UAL, or University of the Arts London, to give it its full parlance, we are an art and design university based in London, currently ranked second in the world, and we're comprised of 6 colleges. We're a collegiate university, so some may have heard of Central St Martin's, London College of Fashion, London College of Communication, perhaps the best known, but we also have 3 smaller colleges, Chelsea, Wimbledon and Camberwell Colleges of Art, respectively. Still no less important. And then we actually also have 5 institutes now, mostly involved in research. The one of note, perhaps of interest to this audience, is the Creative Computing Institute. You wouldn't necessarily think of computers and art and design going together per se, but they very much do, and they're doing some very groundbreaking research at that institute with partners such as Google and so forth. A lot of stuff in artificial intelligence and machine learning and its application in art and design. And in terms of where I fit into this, so I'm the head of architecture, and we sit under, we've recently rebranded IT. It's now referred to as digital and technology. We have a new chief digital officer who's been appointed, who actually is now giving us a direct presence on the executive board, which is really welcome. And that structurally is subdivided into 3 areas: university and corporate, so that's the big systems like finance and HR, as well as some of the big student management systems. We then have a division that looks after student experience, so that tends to be things like timetabling and learning platforms. And then we have a technology division, which is looking after the networking, compute, storage, that kind of stuff. Architecture at UAL is in 2 divisions really. One is covering solution architecture, and the other covers actually the integration service as well. And thanks to COVID, I am a fully blown muley. I did have to get my sleeves rolled up during that time. Phil Hamer, who's on this call, was very much involved with us at that time, but we did quite a lot of things, and it did involve all hands to the pump there just to cover the amount of work that was going through at that time. Anyway, so where did it begin? Well, I guess probably in the same way that it did for everyone, really. As architects, prior to actually setting up a formal integration arm, we were being asked to integrate new systems and so forth, and introduce them into the landscape at UAL. And we had common problems really that always came up. Integration, when it was discovered, was very ad hoc. There were no standards involved. They were difficult to support, impossible to fix, very often invisible, and presented a really great problem for us really all the time. So as a result of that, within my team, people were actually saying we've got to do something about this. We had an awareness of MuleSoft, funnily enough. We'd been along to one of their free sessions that they did at the time. I don't know if they still do. Which was sort of a API experience day. So we had some familiarity with that. Being architects, we obviously thought we ought to look at what have we got now that we could perhaps use. So being an 0365 house, as it were, there was a product then that was part of that suite called Flow, which we did some basic evaluation of to see whether it could meet our needs. Sadly, in its form at that point, it couldn't. And I think Power Automate was very fledgling at that time, which was the logical sort of full fat version of Flow. But for one reason or other, we didn't decide to independently proceed with that and thought, no, we need to actually set up a proper service, look at some tools and platforms and get this off the deck. So we went into a full procurement, and so yeah, the respondents there, MuleSoft, thankfully, actually responded, which was always good. Dell Boomi, which was new to me at the time, wasn't aware of that. Microsoft with BizTalk, Power Automate, I'd say, and they were very much in sort of transition at that point. So it was quite interesting. WSO2 and Talent. Yeah, I don't know what it's like in the private sector, but in public sector, it's doing a procurement is an arduous exercise. It actually took the best part of 2 years, I have to say. So there was endless presentations and meetings and goodness knows what else that we had to go through with that. But it actually came down to two sort of front runners, as it were. MuleSoft still up in there, but also Dell Boomi. Very similar products in some ways, with the sort of drag and drop sort of interface, that abstraction of complexity, which was very appealing to us. We were looking to take it away from real code monkeys, as it were, and make it more intuitive, perhaps. Yeah, it was a close run thing. On paper, Dell Boomi was actually cheaper, but that was a bit of a smoke and mirrors exercise. And I can remember having to pore over spreadsheets and produce some charts for our procurement and finance teams to demonstrate that after about 4 applications, they hit parity, and then Dell Boomi actually starts to get really properly expensive as you scale out the number of integrations you do. So yeah, effectively, at the end of all that, MuleSoft were successfully awarded via Wishworks, who are our partner in all this. And so, yes, money changed hands, and we started our journey. So a very high level, effectively, this is what we built. So we were using Anypoint Platform as a management layer, and because of our InfoSec team at the time, they were quite scared of the notion of things flying around in the cloud. So we actually had to go for a full on-premise solution. So we effectively built 4 environments, Windows servers underneath that, and covered off production, staging, test, and development. So we were using, Design Center, but predominantly probably Studio, really, in all this. Anypoint Exchange, and obviously Runtime Manager to orchestrate what was happening on our environments. And right, so in terms of what did that look like? So we got up and running. Obviously, we were new to this. We were leaning quite heavily on Wishworks and Mule at this stage. Typically, the design patterns that have been in use up to that point were pretty much point to point. Some of them very much just lift and shift. Some with some minor transformation going on. typically scheduled to fire off at a certain time. So a certain product would export a file at a time. We'd shortly after go and pick it up and copy it somewhere else or what have you. So we effectively, our early doors sort of attempts here were very much using that design pattern. So we were just moving stuff across from their old legacy bash scripts and VB programs and so forth that have been deployed thus far. We were moving them across, and actually for us that was quite successful. We were starting to gain visibility of what was going on there and had a common place where we could actually go and see what was going on here. We did leverage a domain configuration very early on so that we could benefit from reusability with our connectors and so forth. Over time, we did develop some best practices amongst us. So I guess there was 3 of us actively working on developing integration apps and so forth. And we did start to evolve some standards around the use of environment set for configuration, using secure properties so that we could encrypt passwords and so forth. And that actually proved to be quite useful in working with our InfoSec team to if you like, get pre-clearance on things. So coming to an agreement with them over a set of standards that we would use and a standard approach and standard characteristics within integration apps did sort of clear the way a bit. It was still a bit of a fight with InfoSec at times. And in those early days, we did actually start work on our first API. So the core system at a teaching institute tends to be the student record management system, and so we started some of our early system APIs in Mule parlance, covering entities such as student, course and enrollment. And Phil's on the call. He can take full credit for a service we built for ourselves, which was a sort of a notification API for sending emails from Mule apps. So if there were problems or something had actually occurred correctly, we had a common framework of handling notification rather than having to build that into every app that we did. So operational learning. So I think after about 2 years of this, making good progress, feeling pretty happy with ourselves, things were going okay. But we were starting to sort of hit the boundaries of what was possible, really. We noticed quite early on, actually, we don't really use the dev server. We do our development in Studio, and then we, as developers, might push that onto test just to make sure it runs up, and then obviously stage it through staging and into production. Patching servers is a nightmare in that it needs downtime. It's quite an arduous job, and it often fell to me, funnily enough, to do so. I was getting a bit grumpy about that, and obviously also because it will disrupt the service, that's quite problematic once you're into the world of APIs. You can dodge the raindrops a bit with scheduled jobs, but not so much when you've got something that's always needs to be on. We needed to be visible to the outside world. We were being asked to work with applications that were increasingly leveraging event APIs, webhooks in alternate parlance, and we were tucked away, not visible at all. We also, there was a need growing to actually expose some information, most, you know, for our own use on our own web pages and so forth, but that was starting to come up. Also, because we were starting to build some APIs here, the management of those was starting to be problematic, and I think probably at one of the Mule Connects, probably just pre-COVID actually, we caught sight of API Manager and started thinking about that. But the other thing we noticed was if we had to take something down to patch it, we could lose data because things were firing off events at us internally. But if we'd taken down the receiving API or endpoint, of course, it might not know that the message hadn't been received. So we were thinking about queuing systems and so forth there. So yeah, after 2 years, we were sort of reaching the limits of what we could do with the architecture of our configuration as it stood at that time. So with my team, lots of conversations around this, and one of my architects actually did a lot of the lab work to investigate, the art of the possible with Mule, and indeed we were talking to MuleSoft at that point. That gave us a shopping list. We were thinking clustering could help us with being able to patch and maintain on-premise environments. But in order to partake of that, we would need to elevate our license from the sort of entry level up to platinum. Could we reslice our vCore allocation so that we're basically wasting resources on our dev server we never use? Maybe we could reallocate those actually up to Cloud Hub. What about API Manager then? We would also need site-to-site VPN and VPC so that we could transition effectively to the sort of hybrid model. And what about setting up a message queue? So we had a shopping list, and so yeah, we started talking to MuleSoft. So this is Ian and Daisy, who were our sector and customer success leads at the time. It never ceases to amaze me that MuleSoft employ people who are friendly and helpful, and whose sole job is actually to talk to Muppets like me, but they do, for which we were very grateful. And as a result of a lot of work done by MuleSoft, we, in the middle of effectively a 3-year contract, reformatted how we operated our licensing, when the licensing fell due, and entered into a new contract with our shopping list fulfilled, famously for not very much money at the end of the day, arguably. Thank you, MuleSoft. So what did that look like then? Yeah, Phil, again on the call, can take full credit for building out an Apache ActiveMQ queue system for us as a cluster again. And we obviously had to do some reformatting on our configuration for the actual Cloud Hub. So we were, we're starting to look at alternative bits and pieces. We could run stuff actually up in Cloud Hub first time. We've got API Manager to explore, and in terms of on-prem, we changed our production and staging clusters down the bottom there to 2 nodes apiece, and we left our test server as a single instance, and we retired our dev server. So that took probably longer than we'd like at the end of the day. That's mostly down to us rather than anyone else. MuleSoft were constantly in touch, so how's it going? And we had endless delays and so forth. Quite a few problems internally with getting our site-to-site VPN up, mostly because of funny enough, Log4j was the issue there, and the fact that some apps were bundling up a copy of Log4j, although it's not active, and the actual clusters were all patched. They were plopping copies of older files there, which gave our InfoSec team quite a few problems. So that took quite a while to resolve, but we did finally. So yeah, we now have a fully hybrid environment. Yeah, so what are we doing currently? So Phil will be pleased to hear this, no doubt, but we've finally, having built out all these items, we've finally built our first experience API, as well as a process API in the middle there, and also leveraged a system API. So we've now got an endpoint that is feeding a couple of our web pages. So at the top there, that's what they talk to. Course and college data is scavenged from our existing SITS API, and we in the sector, I think it's probably fair to say, we're quite interested in widening participation at university, and obviously not everyone has the financial means or indeed the time to really devote to art and design in their careers. So we have a notion of contextual eligibility, where we actually, it helps us identify people that they may not have a particularly lavish portfolio because they're a carer for someone, or they just can't afford the materials to do a lavish portfolio. But it doesn't mean to say that they wouldn't benefit from an art and design training. So we actually also built an API that leverages some open data sources from the UK government. Of course, being the UK government, there's 4 of them and they're all different. So that raised some challenges in terms of getting the same outcome, if you like, from 4 potentially different data sets. And I noticed today, funnily enough, that Northern Ireland has currently taken down their API that they use, so that is causing us a problem. But yes, so we're sort of well underway now with a hybrid environment. Lots of interesting bits and pieces going on there. And yeah, full steam ahead with being able to address some of the issues that we had. We now have a re-architected platform that can actually address a lot of those issues. Any regrets? No. I have to say not, but of course we learned some more, as you do. So message queues, well, we know about message queues now, and we understand how to use them, and are using them an awful lot. It has to be said, in our integrations. I personally don't need the hassle of patching and maintaining that. So Ellie will be delighted to know that I'll be talking to her about any point MQ at some point, because we probably need to be thinking about that. As I said, yeah, we are using event-based design patterns a lot, actually. Our domain project, a domain configuration project, that's got a bit unwieldy. And actually, of course, we can't leverage that if we're deploying applications into Cloud Hub. So we're the start of a rethink about how we architect our applications so they're not so dependent. There will be certain things like we will need to have a domain project to cover off a default connector, HTTP listener, obviously for our system APIs, otherwise we'll get some port conflicts. What else have we learned? Vendor API quality is highly variable. That's the polite version of it. That takes us an awful lot of time. What we find is it's not just about building the integrations themselves, but understanding the vendor APIs, if indeed they're provided, and their limitations and so forth, and the art of possible takes us a lot of time, actually, that discovery, both as source and destination. We are a victim of our own success, massively oversubscribed. There's huge demand now, so we must be doing something right. But of course, that does present quite a lot of challenges for me heading that up, but right across the team. And the other thing we learn is the support and help we get from MuleSoft is very greatly appreciated and has been very instrumental in getting us to where we are. I think we've all had situations where we've bought products from vendors, and of course they promise fantastic support and so forth, but hand on heart, I think MuleSoft come out clear winners in my experience at UAL. Actually, they do deliver it. It has to be said, and they keep a smile on their face about it as well. So yeah, that's been a huge factor in our success with this platform, I have to say. So casting an eye to the future, again, one of the challenges we have with the way MuleSoft see the world, with system APIs, process APIs, experience APIs, Center for Excellence, is we've got no customers in that sense. We don't have remote IT teams doing their own development and so forth who we engage with in that point. We've just got one team, but we are, especially now with the restructure, they're very much part of us, and so we've managed to forge a much closer relationship with them. So we're starting to work around API design with them, and so we're looking at, well, can we get them to write their own specs for the experience APIs they need? Takes a bit of pressure off us, and we just get involved in the the execution side of those sort of things. This is not going to be a surprise to anyone. Data quality, exposing data. I've found this personally. It really highlights problems with quality and consistent data. So we do have political issues. This is our data. And so people think in their silos, so they will do something which doesn't affect their use of the data, but anyone downstream that's has a reliance on it, doesn't necessarily get thought about. So we do have some problems with that. The other bit we are thinking about, we've got quite a few systems that don't actually have any kind of API, and therefore what we have to do is pull the data out in the way we can, even if that's sort of file downloads once a day, and we stage that into then a database that we then wrap an API around. And we are thinking about whether we need to consolidate that. So it's an interesting conversation. I'd be interested to hear people's views on whether that is a good step forward as such. So we've got a common place where we're keeping the master data, and we will have a mechanism to maintain it and then build our ecosystem of APIs around that. CI/CD, yeah, we've been mucking about with this for ages. So yes, I did. We've been looking at Jenkins. So we've done some work around GitHub and getting auto builds done there. Because of going hybrid and thinking more about stuff that isn't sort of reliant on a domain project, in my mind that raises issues in that means individual apps will need to be maintained in terms of connector version numbers, and therefore there's probably something around rebuilding apps on a regular basis rather than ad hoc, because moving away from that may present problems as well. And the other bit we've been thinking a bit more, early stage conversations started to emerge around, I wonder what the sector could do around describing core entities, something that can be shared. So within HE, although we compete. Perhaps not so much us as a art and designers, as a smaller pool of competing institutions, but there is a long tradition of cooperation and co-share. There's various groupings such as UCISA which facilitate that. So yeah, we're thinking where we can go from there. And I guess to sum up, I think we started fully on the on-prem. We're probably around halfway through into hybrid now. And I don't know whether we would ever be able to fully go to the cloud, but I haven't ruled it out. So in terms of a line, we're sort of moving across and gaining some knowledge and some experience, and starting now, I'd say, to get some real value and traction back. I'd say that's not because of an issue with the product. It's our speed of implementation, really, but we are slowly getting there. So that was our story. This is how UAL came to partner up with MuleSoft. And thank you very much for listening. I shall unshare my screen now, if I can.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Justin.
First of all, yeah, thank you very much, Justin. I understand there was a few questions that went in the chat, and I know that it was surrounding kind of your choices around on-prem and obviously eventual move fully to the cloud. I don't know if anyone wanted to pick them up now.
Bobby, wasn't it? Bobby James?
Yeah, give me a chance. I'm trying to come on video so you can see me face, basically. Give me like that. Right. So first of all, a really good presentation, basically. It really kept me interested and entertained. Can I first pick up on your statement of Infosys didn't want to go into the cloud and therefore went on-prem? Can you articulate, I'll be diplomatic and say, can you articulate on that statement to the extent of, if the answer was they were struggling to do it, that's fine with me?
I think it was perhaps, I know I'm obviously not going to name names, but there was some individuals involved in our InfoSec team at the time who were very much ivory tower evangelists. So they didn't have a particularly pragmatic approach to security. And as a result of that, and there was a fearfulness in the, I think that at times I also struggled to comprehend what was going on. And you know, I can remember loads of meetings sort of trying to articulate what was going on, and they would misunderstand, misquote and so forth. So as an institution, we had a difficulty there with the InfoSec team. Things have changed now. We've got some different people involved there who have a different thing. So I don't think that would necessarily be. It was purely down to personalities rather than there being any sort of fundamental problems with you know, MuleSoft or any other integration sense there. I think they were just reluctant to allow a full sort of hybrid approach on day one.
Right, sorry to talk across you. Did they give an architectural reason for it?
Absolutely not, no.
Right, fair enough. No, so
yeah, but to say that was personalities rather than right. Their, you know, being
right.
being.
I'm not criticizing that. There's an element of, if I went 3 yeyears ago, I'd have been a bit, I'm not really sure. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah,
again, the honesty of your presentation is what has made it 10 times more interesting than a lot of the other crap I've listened to this last time.
Thank you very much.
Recording this.
Yes, you're there for posterity. Yeah.
Oh, bollocks. The interesting thing about the patching, so I dealt with other people who said they had to patch on-prem stuff, and they said that was one of the hardest things, one of the most difficult things they had to do. So yeah, I find that interesting, the idea of that, because again, it goes back to patching. When you're doing on-prem stuff, it's a very manual sort of thing. When you do it in the cloud, it tends to be more automated and stuff like that. So you leave it to, which is why there's been in the last 10 years move towards the cloud and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, without a doubt, you know, I mean, it can be done. It's just, do I enjoy it? Have I got better things to do with my life? Yes. So if someone else can take that worry off of me, then that's fine. But obviously, while we have on-prem stuff as well, then it does need to be patching. So the clustering element does allow us to, you know, keep the lights on, patch one server, bring it back up, drop the other one, patch that, bring it back up, job done, you know. So it allows us to do it during the day if we want. Whereas typically, obviously, the pressure would be on to say, well, you've got to do it out of hours or whatever.
So it's not so much questions, so much of interesting points. Vendors APIs. I do know on a previous sort of company, a previous project, where they turned around and said, we were almost testing out their interfaces.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a couple of MuleSoft developers who were basically the test points for their, you know, and the project.
I would argue I had one personal experience. Again, I won't name the product, but I was identifying a fundamental structural bug with their API. We were trying to use watermarking, and the way they were timestamping meant that we were getting the wrong results out of it. And I had to produce a huge chunk of documentation, which clearly demonstrated that they got a problem. So yeah, that sort of stuff is, you know, I think that most people, you know, perhaps a higher level, when they say, "Oh, this is easy; it's got an API." The reality is, no, it's not. Just because they've said they've got an API doesn't mean to say it has the functionality you need, or indeed hasn't got some really bizarre sort of non-standard sort of approaches to things. So that we've found you never know what you're going to be dealing with until you start actually trying to use it and build something that interacts with their API.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of producing all that document, no doubt you thought patching was easy.
Yes, yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah. So some of the things where you said where you're reading sort of stuff, when you're reading and taking various disparate sources, have you looked at sort of RPA implementations?
Funnily enough, that's something we're looking at now. So we have that would be a useful tool in our armory. For some reason, we do have quite a number of very manual tasks, mostly in our finance team. Yeah, we're in early doors conversations, obviously, with the recent offering from MuleSoft. I can see RPA having a fit in our environment as another, you know, string to our bow, because there may be, I've never really understood, never actually deep dived with anyone in finance to pick this out, and we do have the opportunity, whether it's a lack of trust, so they feel they've got to double check everything before committing anything, but if we can't circumvent that, then actually RPA may be a useful tool for us to have in our armory as such.
So
I can see that, Bobby. I can see that. Sorry, Vaughan's just sort of raised his hand. I don't know if that's on the RPA side.
Let him carry on with that, mate, because I'm going on, mate. So I should have.
No, it wasn't on the RPA side. I did have a question which occurred to me for Justin around kind of implementation. So I know that you and your team kind of implemented pretty much everything that exists at the moment. Did you need to revert to any custom code? Did you write any custom code to get what you needed done, or did kind of the MuleSoft, patterns that exist, did they serve your purpose?
We very early on, only once did we have to do something that didn't sit comfortably, but it worked very well actually. we had anyone who's on the call that's familiar with the sector. There's a product out there called WPM, which is a sort of has quite a presence for sort of e-commerce kind of activities. And at the very start, the way they exported data was expose it through an FTPS site, and because there's no connector for FTPS, and so our solution was to wrap WinSCP in the .NET connector, and then use that to scavenge the data out. So you think, wow, I mean, it generally actually worked. It has to be said. Once again, Phil's getting a lot of call outs on this call tonight, but a lot of credit there. Fortunately, they finally switched to SFTP, so we've been able to simplify that, especially as that was another. The .NET connector was one which had got a log4j file in its build routine, it didn't look like there was any plans to do anything about that, so the fact we could retire it was very timely from our point of view. But no, I wouldn't say custom code. We do quite a lot of data weave, actually. Obviously in the early days we were probably dragging and dropping for mapping, but we have some quite complicated conditional stuff, so we very much, would you call that custom code? It's not in my book. It's just using a language that's comes bundle. And the only other odd thing I think we did is we leverage a Java class in OneFlow, so we've got dual authority for student photos, so when they apply, they can upload a photo for use in their student ID. And obviously with phones, the way they're going, the resolution is such, the file size is getting very, very big. There's very limited ways in which you can control that at the ingestion point into the record management system. So what we do when we pass that information through to the card management thing is squish them all down to 30k. So we do that in a Mule app, but very little. I mean, because I'm the trouble with you can do anything you like in Mule. At the end, there's a Java app under the bonnet. You could get really clever if you wanted to, but you've got to think about how operable is that, and how easy is that for someone else to pick up. If you steer too far off the path, you run into operability problems.
Yeah, it's really impressive. I think to find implementations with very little custom code is really refreshing, and it sounds like you guys have done a great job in using what Mule provide, which is great. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Were there any other questions? So I can't see the
Got an easy job tonight, Justin.
Fantastic.
I'll just turn around and say, if we talk about data quality and information, it's basically the worst I've found is Company's House. So probably your data isn't that bad, basically.
It's consistency, and again, I think it comes down to that thing. If the data quality is good enough within that system that it doesn't cause them problems, so it's a cultural thing, I think, as such. Once you start leveraging and saying, actually, the way you've structured this, or you've been a bit sloppy in categorizing, is that a postgraduate or an undergraduate course? Because ultimately you're now looking to say to a student, find your course on a drop down link on a web page, and then it's not structured that makes it easy for them. then it's a problem. So I think it's a cultural thing, and that you won't fix that overnight. But yeah, it does. Once you start trying to leverage data in downstream systems, these sort of things get highlighted, especially when it's beyond the boundary of the system that is generally sort of acting on that information.
Well, to add to that as well, like as you articulate, there's an element. It's more. Some of it is more by accident, as I said. Company's House was more by deliberacy and things like that. And having worked in NHS systems, I always come back to the things of how many variations of sex are there in the data. Yes. It's been 7 or 9, depending on who you talk to or whatever, you know. So therefore, as a consequence, you know, data, there's information in data and all that sort. Anyway, I'll shut up.
Cool.
I have another question, if I may, and it's around. For me, with any implementation, there's, you know, any project, there's always kind of 2 parts to it. There's the technical side of it, and then there's the organizational or the business side. How challenging did you find your kind of organizational structure and environment? You know, did you find that the technical things were easier to do within the organization, or were there organizational kind of blockages and constraints and silos that made things a bit harder for you to move maybe at pace?
It's been a mixed and variable bag, I'd say. Some have been very straightforward, and as I say, I mean, overall, the demand is such we must be doing something right, because people want to come and talk to us about getting information in and out their systems and so forth. So we do, but there is, you know, having said that, there is some behaviours, even when you think, well, I just worked with you 6 months ago, and we were doing this, and now you've circumvented us, and I've just discovered that you're now talking directly to finance, and you want to build something, you know, what is, you know, so it's a mixed bag. You know, I wouldn't have said we've come across any hostility, no territorialism necessarily. And generally, I think people are coming along with that. And I think that is perhaps helped by the fact that we're not in an environment where you've got lots of pockets of IT who are all kind of fighting their own fights. It is broadly central, and especially in this sort of space. So yeah, a mixed bag, I would say, with that. You know, no hostility, no huge sticking points, but yeah, you get the odd thing coming at you left field where you think, well, how's that happened? You know, I was just speaking to you the other week, and now you've just shot around the sides. So yeah, it's, you know, variable, I'd say, is the summary for that one.
Stefan, I believe that you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Now, I had another question for Justin around obviously when you came to evaluate different technologies and platforms, of which MuleSoft was part of. I assume that the pure technology itself weren't the only criteria that you were looking at, and I'm just wondering how the API-led approach of MuleSoft, how that helped you in your journey in the last 4 years, and if you've seen the real benefits of that.
We're only just starting to, I think. So that resonated with us big styly, I have to say. So that was, you know, it wasn't just the the platform, we were looking at the whole package, which is one of the advantages of procurement. You know, you do have to come up with requirements and so forth, and mark everyone against that. We did see that as a benefit. It's just been sad in a way, in that we've been looking for a foothold, and I'd say we've only just started to sort of get that and start to build stuff where we can demonstrate that in action. And I think, you know, again, conceptually, it can be quite difficult to land. It's not, you know, at a business level, how interested are people in that really? But if you can demonstrate getting just the data they need to the point where they need it in a timely fashion, where you can demonstrate that it doesn't cause them problems, that can be really helpful. So that has been a struggle for us to get that, and you know, for not necessarily technical reasons, there have been some this you know, complexity about, well, hang on a minute, you know, if we look at our staff, say, you know, there's no API for us to get information out, and we're just finishing touches to a staff API. But what we've had to do is build a sort of a database, effectively a data table, to say, right, that's where we'll keep them, and we'll wrap around that, and we'll just refresh that once a day from our HR system. So just building that sort of ecosystem, it's taken us way longer than we'd like. But we're, you know, it's a bit of like a snowball, you know, so things are starting to, you know, fit into place. And of course, the more you build, the more you can reuse, the simpler the next steps be. So to be fair, and I say, I don't think, you know, the approach is right, and we get that. It's just, you know, we're because of how much resource we've got to put this, it's taken a while for us to gain any kind of foothold or indeed momentum. We're just seeing the golden shoots of that now. I would say.
No, I have seen that, and I think it might be something linked to the you know, the HE sector, where it's a bit of a mind shift as well, isn't it? It's not the way that people are used to working. You know, if you say to somebody in the university, oh, now you're going to be responsible for the data in this API, they're going to be looking at you, well, why should I be responsible for technology? You know, it's not my job. So you know, it's an interesting conversation to have.
and a lot of people, you know, you again, it can come down to individual personalities, but you know, you'll have someone who's quite a loud voice, who might be, you know, quite rooted in the 60s, so they're thinking about batch operations and copying huge chunks of data across, and you think, but surely if I give you a thing where if you call that, you just get what you don't need to maintain multiple copies of everything everywhere. So there is that, and it can literally come down to the person, in the same way as our, you know, our security landscape. The personalities that involve can be quite a break on things. I've found, and so either kind of slowly winning them over, or indeed through natural wastage, people move on. You know, you can. I mean, Phil be laughing, I'm sure, but you know, we had a torrid time with our InfoSec team at times, and he'll be delighted to know that things have improved greatly.
So just to add a couple of things, you're absolutely right. Why should a graduate be responsible for everybody's data and all this sort of stuff? But just to add the other side, the other extreme of that is this is why they had Sarbanes-Oxley regulation in the States, whereby
absolutely
they turned around and said, you know, as someone who's getting this massive salary and all this sort of things and all this, you can't say you can't get away with it. So, which is why you have systems that are implemented, so there's a certain amount of control and all that sort of stuff. So, Soft as wood, but I agree with you, security people. You know, it's
I don't have a problem with it per se, and ours is probably the most secure system actually that operates. Not all our systems are necessarily securing passwords in config files, but that was one of the big successes. Was in many ways was okay. Can we say what you want, and then we'll come up with a standard that you can agree to, and we'll say we will always build them, and it'll always be TLS 1.2, and we can demonstrate that it's that. We'll always use secure properties, and so forth. So actually gaining that agreement, it was a bit hard won, but it actually did help a little bit get over those points, because otherwise, yeah, you could be stuck in really drawn out conversations, and they were wanting to pore over things in ridiculous detail, and it did slow things up. So getting that sort of pre-agreement was quite helpful in working with that team, I have to say.
Yeah. Did you? I think I happen to know, Justin, that you've looked at API governance as well, and when if you can demonstrate that you're enforcing that compliance, that design time.
Absolutely, yeah.
The conversation becomes a no-brainer.
I'm looking at all the toys you've got in your armory, Stefano, to be honest. So yeah, I'm aware of that, and I want to look at that, because again, especially if we're thinking, okay, with our web team, can we get them to define their own APIs? We need to oversee that. That's great. We can push it out to them, but is there certain characteristics and so forth? Will they always define the error routes and so forth religiously and all this sort of kind of stuff? So I think having something that can take care of, so again, yeah, really interested in that. There you are, Ellie. There will be another one for you.
She's frantically writing notes here.
Yeah, oh, that's quite a bit of money now. Yeah.
Nice.
Was there any other questions from anyone at all, or even for Vaughan or Stefan at all? Obviously, we've got Ellie and Stefan on the call from MuleSoft. Has anyone got anything outside of what Justin's spoken about that they're interested to know about, either MuleSoft product roadmap or things that are coming, or where they might be able to support them at the moment? Now's an opportunity to grab them and put them on the spot.
If nobody says anything, I'm going to go quickly. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Nothing at all.
I was actually going to again, because Justin is off the back of his presentation, but I suppose that's a question to everybody on the call now, is that there have been quite a few announcements recently, and new products being released and all that sort of stuff. So if anybody's got any questions about anything that they've seen or heard of, or they're not sure about or whatever, happy to take any questions. Hopefully I can answer. I'm not going to pretend I can answer every single question, but I'll try my best.
I can see Steve's hand's gone up straight away there.
It just occurred to me, apologies for the background noise, I'm walking to a train at the moment, but just occurred to me, some of the new, the Cloud Hub 2 stuff sounds very interesting and potentially very useful, but there seem to be quite a few limitations with it around, for example, using the Cloud Hub API to raise alerts and things like that, which you can then trigger emails from. Do you know anything about the plans to, I guess, address those, or is that going to be a limitation?
I don't have this specific answer to that question, Steve, but I am sure that any limitations of that sort that are coming out now about Cloud Hub 2.0, I'm sure the product management team are seriously looking into it. And as you know, we take feedback from our community and our customers, and things tend to improve over time. So I am sure that if there are big things like that they will be looked into, and the product will be improved over time. I'm confident of that. But I don't have the answer specifically to that question, Steve. Sorry.
No, it was more general around kind of whether the features have been left out deliberately and deprecated, or potential for them to come back.
No. Anything that was of use to our customers, I'm sure they will be looked into a future roadmap.
Good. Fingers crossed. Anyway, thank you.
I was going to quickly ask something to Justin. With obviously the beauty of hindsight and given the journey you've been on, if there's anything that you could have changed in your, I'd say, integration journey, not necessarily just with the product, which is MuleSoft in this instance, but if there's anything you could have changed or done differently without kind of obviously changing the scope of your parameters of your budgets and all the rest, your other controls, etc., what would it be?
Oh, if I could have just said, can we buy my MuleSoft, I could have got 2 years of my life back at the end of the day, which, you know, you can't do, unfortunately. So that, you know, so that's the frustration. I don't know why it popped in my head, but for the record, we went straight to Mule 4, and actually, if there was one, and I was on the fence about that, really. It was very new when we started our journey, and like always, you know, school of hard knocks, you think, oh, brand new product, you know, maybe we'll stick at 3 and move on. But we in a moment of madness, I thought, no, let's just do it, you know, let's go straight to 4. And that again, I just think, wow, that was probably a really sound decision at the time, because otherwise at some point in all this, as well as re-architecting the platform, we'd have probably had to do an upgrade from 3 to 4. So I'm glad we did take that view. Arguably, was that a bit brave because it was very new to the market at the time we you know, started using it? Don't know, but that was certainly a one decision that I think was right. I was scratching
decisions, or do you follow like certain government frameworks to procure like products and services?
Yeah, no, yeah, it's interesting really, because obviously, you know, arguably, are we public sector now in higher education? You know, that's probably less so now. We have very little funding actually. So, but yet we're still sort of aligned to the public sector sort of procurement things. So compared to the private sector, you know, that it does, you know, one, slow things down. It can get really, you know, difficult when you're procuring anything. You know, I was involved in the procurement moving when we had to move student record management systems, and that was all told, that was, you know, 4 years, really long procurement. It was a consultative procurement exercise, and then the implementation stage, adding, you know, functionality on, you know, it can be a big hit really for anyone. So yeah, that is a problem.
Nice. Well, yeah, thank you for that. Anyone else? Last questions at all for anyone at all? Either Vaughan, Stefan, anyone for Justin?
They've all fallen asleep. You see, this is what it is. I put them to sleep, and they've all nodded off.
I've been checking numbers. You've retained a steady number throughout. So yeah, again, I don't know if everyone can hear or unmute or give a little clap, or I don't know if you can share emojis. There might be some reactions there. The reactions button. Maybe press the reactions button. Justin for his time and generosity in putting that together. It's not easy to do, and we appreciate you kind of bringing that story to the community. So that also, so thank you very much, Justin.
You're more than welcome. I'm sorry it wasn't as, you know, as technical as perhaps is usual on this thing. Maybe we'll see if we can do a deep dive in one particular area at some point for and perhaps you know, come on one of these and talk tech at you.
Absolutely. But I mean, yeah, like I said, it did start, this meetup 5 years ago started out very, very techy. We've since attracted, as more people have come into the integration space, that, you know, there's roles that didn't exist 5 years ago, like integration product owners and stuff like that. So there's a number of different kind of people that join these calls, architects, developers, and business people, the work. So I'm sure that it resonated with a number of people, and that maybe kind of paves the way for a slightly more technical meetup next time. So if we've got any volunteers, obviously, please speak now or forever hold your peace, or reach out to Don or I. But yeah, it might be nice to have something really techie and perhaps a demo. Maybe I can Will G out of retirement again, see if he wants to do one. But yeah, I don't know if anyone's put me in the comments now, if anyone's got anything they really want to cover at all, or anyone got any suggestions now they'd like to cover in the next meetup.
Or just to hear about if someone else covers it for them.
No, everyone knows it all. Awesome. So if you know it all, just apply to recruitment@quadcore.co.uk. So if everybody knows it all, we'd definitely be keen to speak to you.
Jitsu has just said, yeah, RPA there and Cloud 2.0, yeah.
RPA Cloud 2.0, nice.
I think RPA we thought about that one before, didn't we, a little while ago? And again, it was finding someone that I guess was up to speed using it enough to deliver a presentation on what they've done. Again, I think if anyone's done that yet.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I understand the RPA team within MuleSoft still quite in its infancy, and
yes, and they do weekly presentations.
Sorry, Francis.
There's weekly meetups and weekly videos being done by the RPA team. Yeah, they are quite young, but they're doing regular different angles for the RPA product.
Okay.
I don't think many other people have used it or explained it very well or demo it very well.
Okay. Maybe we could challenge MuleSoft then to roll out the RPA team, and
I would suggest doing that. Yeah. And I went on the Cloud Hub 2 training a couple of weeks ago, the first one in the EMEA area. Yeah, it was pretty good. Mostly about setting up your security right, changing from roles-based to teams-based access control.
Oh, right, okay.
Well, Francis, you're usually ahead of all these things as MuleSoft ambassador, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Mentor, ambassador?
I am, yes. And I shall be doing a presentation next week at the conference. Well, 2 presentations and some technical demos. I could have spoken an awful lot about higher education as well, because I did work at university for 15 years, but we weren't a MuleSoft user. But I do know that UCAS were a MuleSoft user, and yes, I was going to start talking about Lucian's ethos model and the RAML specifications for the student entities, but it's a long-winded discussion, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I don't know whether we'd ever get any kind of agreement, because what is a student? It starts there, doesn't it?
No, let's not have that conversation, please. What is a course? What is a module? Oh,
exactly. Yeah.
Can we talking American or UK?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Both.
Cool. Yeah. On that note, we'll take that on board around the RPA stuff. Between Jonathan and I, will speak to MuleSoft and see if we can perhaps get someone on this next one. Ideally, we'd like to try and do another one before Christmas if we can get to everyone together. It might be a bit of a push, but if not, we'll get everyone together early in the new year. But yeah, thanks again to everyone for their support. Jonathan, if you want to add any final words at all.
No, exactly as you said there. Look, thanks everyone that's logged in. Look, hopefully, I know we had to switch back to remote for this one, given a few different challenges. But yeah, no, massive thanks to Justin. Great presentation. I think looks like it was received incredibly well. And yeah, as Chris said, if we've got the opportunity to do something face to face before the end of the year, then yeah, we definitely will be.
Cool. And use the group as well. There's a ton of members in there to ask questions, share stuff. If there's other meetups going on that are of interest, or blogs or insights, post them in there. There's a good community of people in there as well. So it's a good platform to utilize the community in that way outside of just this meetup.
Fantastic.
Have a lovely evening.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers,
Bye.
Andy.
Yes.